Welcome to the Squad Games Podcast. Squad Games Podcast.
What would you say is your favorite type of dice? And not just like the D6 or the D4, but like, do you like dice with inclusions? Do you like casino dice? Do you like metal dice? What do you guys think?
I like epoxy precision dice.
What are those ones?
So precision dice are usually made like as a D&D like thing where they're supposed to be equal on all sides and balanced and all made of one material. It's kind of what I switched to for like D&D and stuff. They're like sharp edge dice that are supposed to be cast in a certain way. That's my favorite kind of dice.
Those are the old school D&D dice from back in the early 80s where you had to have a crayon to put the numbers in.
Really?
Yeah, you had to rub a crayon on them to get into the number grooves and then wipe off the excess.
So you can see it.
Because all the old, like your D&D beginner box set came with a set of dice and a crayon to put the numbers in.
That's so cool. I didn't even know that was a part of history.
Yeah. I was there, 3,000 years ago.
I think of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe thing. Like, don't lecture me on the old magics. I was there when they were. No, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, I'm a fan of like, call me basic, but I like the ones you get from like Frontline Gaming, the sort of small but not quite Chessex 36 set small. You get like 12 in a pack. Like the ones we have, the squad game style ones.
The 16 millimeter standard. Yeah,
those are nice. Like they have a good, like you can hear it here. They have a good little sound. And they're fun to roll.
The reason why I don't like Chessex is because they're the way they're polished. I'm just not a big fan of tumble polishing. So I think that those are also tumble polished, but they have a sharper edge. So I like the sharper edge.
Yeah, they definitely do.
I like the dice from Baron of Dice out here in Maryland. I like his square edge dice because I'm a definite dice goblin. I buy all the faction dice for any faction I have. So I have probably thousands of dice.
Oh, nice.
I use some of Baron of Dice stuff, and I think it's fun too. He has like a matte dice too.
Yeah,
those are interesting.
He did the ones for Kill Team Open.
Yes,
the matte black dice.
Yeah, they were really pretty.
Yeah,
you don't get to see a lot of matte dice.
You don't.
No, we're a very gloss and shine kind of community.
See, the best thing about dice is that they're very much
personable.
Well, personable and like how you're feeling, right? Like if dice are like betraying you, you might want to switch to like the dice that have never failed you. You know what I mean? Like even though they're statistically going to roll the same.
But it's the feeling.
It's the feeling, it's very, very emotional. So Janis, you just must have thousands of D&D dice too, right?
It's mostly D6s. I mostly do it for my Warhammer dice, but I do have a lot of various D&D dice as well.
So Games Workshop has always been a D6 company. All their games have been D6s.
Hence why I have thousands of
D6
six-siders around here since I've been in the hobby since the 80s.
So like right at the beginning.
Yeah, I got in 88 is when I purchased the Rogue Trader book.
That is definitely a time to get into that. I mean, hey, they were doing the print.
They did the reprint recently.
The reprint. I think my friend bought one. So that's cool.
Yeah, looking at my shelf here, I have 3 copies of the old Rogue Trader. My original copy, a hardback copy that I bought at a used store, and somebody gave me a copy of the reprint. I still have in shrink wrap from a couple years ago.
That's pretty rad.
And my hardback is signed by Rick Priestley.
Wow. Look at you over there.
Yeah.
Can you get that graded? Do people want that graded? I don't know.
I probably should.
today we have a very fun topic for y'all.
Yeah.
It involves tournaments.
Yay, tournaments.
Tournaments.
And it's something that us as TOs and players, I think, would benefit a lot from. It's something we may not always think about, but it comes up probably at every event you go to. So we're going to get into that, and that's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a little controversial,
A
probably.
little controversial. You're absolutely right.
I think the subject is controversial tournament stuff. Descriptive. So descriptive.
I mean, hey, that's the right description. I would consider that descriptive.
And I apologize for any hurt feelings in advance.
I hope that everyone learns from it. Yeah.
You may get offended in this podcast, and that's okay. You don't have to agree with us. We might change your mind, and you might jump on our Discord and let us know how wrong we actually are.
And you may change our minds.
And you may change our minds. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm open-minded. I'm not against hearing a better perspective.
Absolutely. Being closed-minded is always a bad thing to be in a leadership position. So let's make sure that we're all open-minded. So do you guys want to start off with proxy models, since we've been getting a lot of questions about teams for LVO?
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm a fan of proxies.
So there's a little guide picture that Giacomo found, and he'll post it in the Squad Games chat once again. But the way that we look at proxies or alternatives is that there is certain varying levels of acceptableness. All right. So like the main rule that you have to follow for these kinds of models, especially in a large tournament scene, or going to Games Workshop. Games Workshop has their own set of things. They don't really allow very much 3D printed stuff unless if you sculpted it yourself, so on and so forth. They have like a bunch of extra rules from outside of, like we're 3D people. I like 3D stuff. So we don't poop on that. But we want to make sure that we don't ever add cognitive load to our opponents. And we want to make sure that we're staying faithful to the team. Is there anything that's like a super basic that you can say, G or Janis, to these to just like the most basic premise before we dive in?
In terms of proxies, right?
Yep.
Well, I feel like if you're going to play a Space Marine of whether Heretic or Loyal, it should probably be a Space Marine. That's at least the first thing. Have the Space Marine armor. You can have whatever head or whatever weapon you want, I guess, but it should at least be a Space Marine.
Yeah, it should be at least something in power armor.
Yeah, like if you're going to have an orc, it should probably be an orc of some sort. That's the easy one to be first. And if it's related, because there's things that are in the same faction that are very close looking, but you could make work. Like I could totally see commandos, but them just using like the savage orcs or something.
Right.
Like that could work, All right, they're relatively the same, and then it comes down to, can you make the model represent what it is? Like if it's a recon guy or the comms boy, can you put the little backpack with a thing to be like, oh, okay, that's an antenna, that guy's the comms. Easy, I can figure that out just by looking at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can do that and your opponent knows what it is each time right away, you're doing a great job with your conversions, proxies, or whatever you're using.
Janis,
that's my 2 cents.
Do you have anything to add, Janis? I have a lot to say on this subject.
The things that I have to say on it, like I said, if you're trying to do a Space Marine, it should be somebody in power armor, same profile, same height, or taller than, because I know in a lot of ways in tournaments, even if it's like modeled slightly shorter, that can be considered modeling for advantage. So if the way I look at it is if the model causes you a disadvantage, you're probably fine.
Yeah.
As long as it's in the same category. Like using a Trader Marine and saying they're intercession, as long as they're the same height and your opponent knows beforehand what faction you're actually playing, there shouldn't be any confusion. Like say, like right now, there's not a World Eaters kill team, And if somebody puts together their World Eaters and it's like, nope, they're Assault Intercessors, but I'm playing them as World Eaters, that's fine.
Shout out to Lucas.
Yeah. Lucas did that at SoCal Open. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's exactly
he literally he ran
cool.
he ran all Khorne berserkers and then didn't take a gunner. He just ran at them and tried to murder everything. And he either won really hard or lost very hard. It was very entertaining.
Hey, I know that full well with playing my my Flesh Terrors.
He went rapid duelist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He just went. That's what you do, Janis.
No, I do duelist and aggressive.
Oh, that's another good one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was very entertaining. And the fact that he also never took the grenade launcher. All of his models looked pretty much the same other than his one guy with a plasma, So like,
yeah.
It was very acceptable for what he was trying to do, even though the models were definitely an alternative, right? Because when we look at the models, I'm going to look at this graph, right? We have alternative models, which can be anything from 3D printed. They can be casted from another source. They could be a completely different model, but they're all WYSIWYG, right? So WYSIWYG is what you see is what you get. So they have the correct weapons. So one of my favorite WYSIWYG conversions that I've seen is a guy from Bats, Miguel. Miguel does these beautiful Navy breachers. He came to the AVTT last year and took our critical feedback and went home, reprinted his models, chopped off all the 3D arms, and then attached the actual Navy breacher arms and weapons. On top of that, on the bases, he also has their names. So like it's way easier to say like, hey, this model's this person because I have the name of this model glued to the base.
Yeah.
This is my Armiger, right? This is my cat, So like if you have an acrylic ring that goes around the base indicating that this is my comms, this is that, right? As TOs, we are much more likely to approve those. So there's a few other things that I'll touch on after that. But then you have like models that are obviously converted. So they have sculpting, they have this, they have that. But they're still WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. You have the right weapons, you have the right options. That's the thing that we're looking for before anything else. Then you start getting into more dangerous territory. Go for it.
When talking about conversions is just be sure you are of a similar profile and the same height or higher.
Yes.
Correct. Because Games Workshop as well, they don't stop you from putting cork on your base. So you can make models taller, right? So like you can make them 1/8 of an inch taller. Like it's not a really big deal. Like the thing is when people start, getting shorter models, if all of your team are Frodo from WRTEL, we might have a problem. That model's sick, by the way.
I do want to mention something with Kill Team Justinian. Bring the sexy back. The
Justine, I think everyone on our Discord was telling us it's Justine, like a stain.
Justine, Justinian, Just Timberlake.
Yeah. Justine Timberlake.
But that group, the model of the infiltrator, the guy with the sniper rifle.
The Eliminator.
I can't remember. He is standing. Now, in the box of models that you can buy from Games Workshop, they have a few that are kneeling. So if people were running Kill Team Justine, they need to use the standing model, not the kneeling one.
You think so?
I'm doing some illegal stuff. I've been taking the spot down.
I believe so, because that's the official model for that kill team. And if you're using the kneeling one, he's significantly shorter than the official model.
I could see that. I never really thought about that model in particular, just because.
Yeah, because I was looking at my models I could use for that kill team, and I'm like, oh, here's my sniper rifle guy. Oh crap, he's the kneeling guy, not the standing guy.
Just put him on a tree trunk. G, he'll be fine.
You could do that, just as long as he's the same. Just as long as he's the same height as the official model for the team.
Yeah, I'm just going to use the sniper sergeant. So like he's already standing up. So like there we go.
Yeah,
I guess that's the same as using the Pathfinders, the rail guns that lay down.
Oh,
so
yeah.
when they originally, G, you've seen mine.
Mm-hmm.
When they originally came out, you could get rail rifles that were laying down in the sniper position. And even though there's still official GW models, they have like an oval base. And technically, I guess they're allowed because they are just GW models. It'd still be considered modeling for advantage, right? Like you could just like lay behind something entirely and not be seen. So
yeah, because I have a bunch of the old Games Workshop Imperial Guard snipers that are the guys that are laying on the ground.
Yeah. So as long as your models are a faithful representation and you're not trying to confuse anyone and no one is confused by saying like, hey, I see that model. I get it. I understand. Or if you can convince somebody then, and they understand, then cool. Right.
Yeah.
So you get to the dangerous areas when you start using count as models or full proxies. Right. So let's see here. A proxy is just like, hey, I'm going to use this model for this model. Now, these models are very unlikely unless if they have a lot of heavy conversions so that they at least look like the other team or they still have the same WYSIWYG. There's a few teams that have been donated to us. Last year, we had a Cataphractii Terminator team say like, hey, I feel like this one's, we've had a couple of these ones. Here's a couple Cataphractii Terminators from, Horus Heresy. Would these be okay for intercession? And I brought this up to G and he said no. G, do you want to tell them why you said no?
Yes. Well, first off, the way they were explaining it was these guys are the assault ones and these ones are the not. The weapons themselves are just a little too off, where someone who doesn't know, let's say they're just playing Kill Team, they don't know 30K at all, would be like, what's what?
Yeah.
Like, what's a Cataphractii Terminator?
Yeah.
They're also larger, so they're bigger than the scale of an intercession. There was just enough things that were a little off that might make it hard for your opponent. So it wasn't necessarily because I don't want you to use those models, but you also want to think about the people you're playing against, and you want to have them still be able to understand it. Like we mentioned, less cognitive load. They can see what that is. They know exactly what it is. So ultimately it was why it's just not something that I can approve.
Yeah. So like, then you also get to somebody who recently asked for these normal orc boys and mech boys to be the Hyrotech. And we unfortunately had to say no because, ultimately they are just purely a proxy, right? And like, you can't, there's no way to say like, hey, this guy has a Gauss cannon. I mean, you just can't, right? So it was a very difficult sell. Meanwhile, we have people like Emmanuel from Strategic Advantage and Southern Discomfort, that if you go check out his Instagram, eman.paints, I believe it is. He has some wonderful conversions for different kill teams that he's converted from orcs. You also have Ray Yeti from this year's BAO. We had him on the podcast. He had an amazing savage orc. I think there were some kind of AOS orc that he converted into the kin band. And this year he's working on something else. So that we approved for LVO, also orc wise. So like, even though they are definitely a count as proxy, they still have a WYSIWYG element to them where they're all still using the correct weapons, the correct gear, and they make sense. They narratively make sense, right? It's not like you're saying like, you're not saying a Space Marine, I mean, an Imperial Guardsman is a Space Marine, or a Kasserkin is an intercession, right? So like, there are certain things and certain elements that you want to try to stay faithful to the teams.
Yeah, like the one that I had been working on, but kind of stopped since the team is kind of in a bad place, is for extraction. I was kit bashing up my Necromunda enforcers to be my cops and making sure they all have the same type of weapons and everything. But that project stalled out when they seem unplayable.
They are decently unplayable. Well, I mean, they're still like a B tier team. It's just other teams just, hey, you know what they're great in? Inquisition.
Yeah.
You know, Inquisition lacks a viable leader. Moving on.
Couldn't help but take a jab.
Yeah, he has to take that jab.
Yeah, every time. I'm like Dolph Lundgren in the ring against Apollo Creed. You know?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. So is there anything else you guys want to touch on these proxy things? They're going to be, most things are probably going to be fine in a local RTT or in your normal pickup game. But when you go to a place like LVO, you go to Nova, you go to New York Open, you go to the LSO, any FLG event, any kind of like something that's going to have more than 32 players, maybe even 24 players, you definitely need to make sure that what you're playing, because I even run alternative models. All of my models for Vetguard are from Hardcore Miniatures, right? Except I do have a couple Catachan models, but they're not the actual Vetguard, right? Because I don't like Krieg very much.
Right.
Yeah, the only thing, and this is just something that I do, if I'm going to be using something that is a alternate model or something that could be something that I feel that could be a point of contention at an event, I'll bring at least a unpainted model of the correct model and say, well, if you're worried about this being a potential advantage, here I have the actual model that I can stand in place of that for this game.
Well, that's a really good tip. I use that a lot for movement when I want to move my mine layer or I want to move like a contentious model. I'll pick up a dead model or I'll take a model that I'm not using or a completely unpainted model, put them in the place and be like, hey, do I have vision here? Yes, cool. Now let's swap out the models, right? No, okay, let me move them this way a little bit. It's a very useful strategy as well.
But I'll try to have every model that is kind of the official model from the team in my case, just in case somebody doesn't like my. For me, it comes down to using a lot of old school, like Rogue Trader era minis, where the mini might be slightly shorter because they are metal and from 30 years ago, and scale creep is a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we no longer play a 25 mil game. This is easily 28.5. Easily.
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to say is that each scene, so if like you're listening to us and you're coming from the UK, right? Or you're coming from Australia, I have no idea how they deal with this in Australia. I haven't talked to bands about it. Or in Spain. I know that the UK, because I've spoken in depth with John Reese, Can You Roll a Crit, that typically if you're going to have a model, you can never get your model for advantage or disadvantage. I mean, it's both, right? So like typically you'll always bring a model of the same. So you have like an unpainted team and then you'll have your converted team. Yeah. And then when something happens, you swap those. To me, I think that slows the game down. And at our events, what we typically do is if we have approved a model, you play with the model as is. We had some controversies with this last year because we didn't have this rule set in stone for LVO. And, like I made a ruling that, favored the London scene and like I think even Games Workshop's perspective on the same thing. Like you swap in and out the models, but since I already like approved the models, it feels bad. Mm-hmm. So like from there on out, like we went back, we reassessed, and I think that it's kind of like if I've seen the model and G has seen the model and we accept the model, then it's played as is. And I think that is probably the best way to go about it for tournament organizers, so that it doesn't slow the game down. But also, like, then it lies on the TO. So ultimately, what that means is that now it's a little bit harder to get your alternative models approved, because we have to uphold a certain standard of what we think is viable and what's not viable for the community especially at these larger events. But I feel like it stifles the hobby just a tad, but I think that it upholds the competitive integrity to do that kind of a way. Because I don't think that saying like, "Hey, we approve the model, let it ride. Let's let it ride," right?
Yeah,
like a Denver Bronco player. Sorry, I'm not a Broncos fan. I will remain silent on that. Let them cry. Let's go Raiders. They suck too, but that's okay. They suck so bad, and it's amazing. I love watching them lose. Okay, even though they're my favorite team. All right, moving on. So I think that there's a lot of great things that we can take from the hobby side of things. And the thing that we always want to make sure is that we don't make it hard for our opponents, because it's already hard enough to remember your rules and do them correctly, right? So let's make sure that everyone's having a good time, everyone feels heard and happy at a tournament, you know?
Agreed.
Yeah.
100%.
So the next one we're going to move on to is probably the most controversial thing of all. I see countless talks on Command Point's Discord, on Glass Half Dead's Discord, on the YouTubes, everything about this one specific subject, and that's time clocks. Ooh,
Dun, dun, dun.
so scary, time clocks. So before we move on to this subject, G, do you want to tell the community about your experience with time clocks? I'll tell mine, and Janis, you can tell yours.
Okay.
Before we dive into anything.
I'll tell you my experience with time clocks is that the Leap R, what the hell is this thing called? The Leap something. I think it's called Leap. The clock I'm holding in my hand, you can hear the buttons.
Yes.
Used to cost like $7 or something. And then it shot up in price because everyone who played 40K was buying them because they're cheap. And they're super easy to use. Look, I click the button, I click start. All right, that's it. You know, and it's not my turn. I hit the button. I think they're awesome when it comes to staying organized for like near the top. You got 2 hours, so everyone has their 60 minutes to use, which is perfectly fine. You know, and at that level, maybe, you know, like a good example was the what was the GW tournament that everyone went to, and they had like 4 hours. It's like a big old one. I can't remember what it's called right now. But the GW tournament,
the Grand Narrative, I believe, is
was
what
that
it's
what it was?
called. Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that people want us to call it something else. Maybe we should refer to it as the U.S. Open Invitational Finals.
Okay,
It's a lot more of a word. What U.S. Invitational Finals? USIF.
Yusuf.
There we go. Yeah,
you go.
Yusuf.
So the Yusuf gave you 4 hours, and I would assume that each player probably had 2 hours, though they probably didn't use chess clocks. They
I think this year's they're looking at 3-hour rounds, I believe.
Which is fine too, you know, like you got 3 hours to play the game. I think it's more than enough. Realistically, I think an hour a player is more than enough. On average, these games take about 2.5. And when you're at that higher level, you know your team, you know what your opponents are probably using. So you have some of those things that would slow you down. Like if I had to open up a book or open up Wikipedia and I have to look something up, that's kind of removed, you know, because you're at that level of play. You sort of remember most of that. Sure, it's going to happen, but you know.
Janis, can people use Wikipedia at GW events, or do they have to use the books?
I can't really answer that question because I've actually seen people use apps and Wikipedia at the GW event.
Okay.
But if I'm going to an event that's being run by Games Workshop, I'm going to have the book with me.
I think that's the safe thing to do. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you're going, make sure you bring the book. All right.
It's as easy as that. So that's my thoughts on time clocks. They keep things organized near the top. They're not super hard to use, but I'll give you a con since I'm giving you the pros. People do forget to click it, and that is a legit thing people do when they play games. They practice with a chess clock.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you that.
Have you played 40K with them?
Many times.
And what was your experience with that?
I remembered to click my clock.
That's good.
And my opponent was there too to always remind me in case I forget. When I first started playing with chess clocks, my opponent was like, "Hey, it's my turn now. Make sure to click your button." They were nice enough to tell me.
Yeah,
so that way I'm not burning my time.
Was it stressful for you?
No, I also don't play at that level where it was like I knew I was going in. I was probably going to win a round.
Marines.
Yeah, I was.
You're not
I was
playing Tyranids,
right? I wasn't worried about like all the movements and stuff. I kind of generally knew what I was doing. So it wasn't too bad for me. It did add another thing. I just had to remember to be like, oh, yep, end of turn, click the button, and you get used to it. You get used to it pretty fast.
Yeah. How about you, Janis?
So I just want something that came into my head while G was discussing that the price went up on the time clocks. I'm just imagining, this is just how my brain works. Imagining this little company. I know they're mass produced kind of things, but I'm thinking like some little old man making these by hand and sending them out to the people that actually play chess competitively. And it's like a couple a month, and then all of a sudden 1,000 orders come in from 40K players. And he has no idea what 40K is. So that's just kind of my headcanon right now.
That's hilarious.
I'm gonna believe that.
But anyway, chess clocks. I have become kind of a fan of chess clocks since my introduction to them. My first real time using a chess clock and it actually mattering was this year at Nova. My opponent, he's like, "Hey, no offense, but I'm putting everybody on a chess clock that I'm playing." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm a fast player anyway. It's not really a big deal." And we started playing and I used it and I really enjoyed having it there to see my time and making sure my opponent isn't chewing up my time in this. So I felt it was a good thing, and I actually may start using them more and more in the games that I play against people.
I think it's a good habit. So my experience is the very first time I was ever introduced to time clocks, I was just getting back into 40K, and I was very nervous about this team tournament. And Alex Squires, who was our team captain, was like, "Everyone has to play on a time clock." And I was like, "Is that a thing now?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh gosh." So I started playing it, and it made me better because it made me faster. And I think like the worst experiences I've ever had with a time clock is me timing out because I was too slow. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, once you've done that a couple times, you learn to play faster, right?
Yeah.
Because when you time out and when you reach 0 on the clock, right, you're no longer allowed to do activations. Like you're allowed to fight, you're allowed to roll defense dice or saves. In 40K, it would be saves, but you're no longer allowed to move models. Like you've used up all of your allotted time, which is fair, right?
Yeah,
it's like
the only thing you're able to do is defensive type actions.
Correct. So, in Kill Team, there is a few differences because it's, more alternating. People are going back and forth, but people can do it for chess. People can do it for Kill Team, right? We recently did SoCal Open, and we enforced the time clock quite heavily on top table. And everyone who's never used it before thoroughly enjoyed it. Jason, who won, he even got down to 1 second left. 1 second.
That was rough. Like I was worried he was going to run out, and he just barely made it.
And what he said was, what I loved most about time clocks is that I could sit there for 10 minutes on my time to make a move and not be stressed out that it was taking up my opponent's time.
Yeah.
Alexander Popov said that he really enjoyed it and he proved to himself that he was not slow, right? Like his first turning point is slow, but after that, he said that he really sped up, right? Kellen played Vetguard on it. No one timed out We got pretty close a couple times, but no one actually timed out, right? And, I think that's also because you were there helping, making sure people were tapping the clocks because some of them were new, making sure that the time was running correctly. But there is like time clock etiquette, time clock abuse, and we'll talk about those and make sure that if you are practicing for an event, I would always suggest to practice on a time clock, because when you practice on a time clock, you're training yourself to be fast, to go within your own time, to make sure that when you go to these tournaments, you know that you're not the problem, even if you don't use it. Because there's been too many times, too many people I've talked to saying like, oh, I've played against a slow player here. This guy slow played me this. This has happened here. And yeah, I also have that like once, right? For Kill Team. But the thing is like, that's on me. Like I should be asking for a time clock sooner. I should be asking for a TO sooner. Like maybe it was also because I was also slow, like I take responsibility for playing slow before, right? Since then, I don't think I've gone to time. I think that there's been a couple times where games have gone long, but that's good. That's okay. That happens to everyone, right? Even Chris Baki, he'll know what I'm talking about. He's going to murder me later for that. I love you, Chris. So I think that like some things that are really important is that when you're using the time clock, to always tap it to your opponent and then to remind your opponent to tap it back to you.
Yeah.
Or to make sure it's not on theirs, because there's something called weaponizing the clock. When you tap the clock and somebody else, and then you don't remind your opponent to do the same. You should only be moving your models when the time clock is running on your half, right? Another thing that people have been doing is like, usually people take dice rolls and they roll and they figure things out. If your opponent, and it's always on one side, you don't tap it back and forth for people to roll dice in Kill Team. But the thing is if somebody's going to take an enormous amount of time to figure out what they want to block, tap it to them.
Yeah.
There's nothing saying you can't do it. It's just like, just don't be a dick about it. Don't do it every single time and make it ticky-tacky, but just make sure that just be like, hey bud, you're taking a little long, tap it. Okay. Then they're going to be like, oh, it's on my time. And then they're going to go faster, or they can take their time and think about it. Right.
Yeah. But and that's the only time that would really come up is in a melee attack situation where somebody's like, wait, let me math this out to see what's my best. Yes.
And that's okay. That's okay to take your time and figure out what it is. Just make sure it's not on your opponent's time. In fact, if you're going to take some extra time to figure it out, you should tap the clock to yourself to be sportsman wise and make sure that you are giving your opponent the amount of time and not abusing the clock by saying, hey, this is on your time. We've already agreed that I'm going to take my time and figure it out. No, don't do that. Right. I'll come over and I'll give you a sportsmanship flag if I find out that's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that another problem, which I've done this before, and I didn't realize it was a problem until I had to sit down and make rules for this, but taking actions in parallel of your opponent, right? This kind of goes back to, you should never touch a model when it's not your turn, like plain and simple, right?
Right.
But if you are making a move in parallel with your opponent to keep the time clock low on your side, that is an infraction, right? Make sure that the time is running on your side to make sure that you're doing the same thing. Same thing with deployment, right? If your opponent is deploying, not looking at the clock, you also deploy, he taps it to you, you tap it back. No, don't do that. Like make sure that each person's using it correctly, right? And just do it fast, right? If you know where you're going to place them, just place them on your time. Noticing an inappropriately running clock and failing to announce it. That's another one.
Yep.
Be like, hey, bud, this was running on your time. I don't know how long it was running on your time. Let's add like 30 seconds to mine and we'll just run it on mine for an extra 30, right?
Yeah, it's easy enough to do.
Weaponizing the clock to win or gain an advantage is not the key. The clock, the point of a time clock is to make sure that everyone is playing their best game in a reasonable amount of time. Because people say like, oh, I don't want to be timed. Well, it's a 2-hour round. You are being timed. right?
Let me put something out there that's a question that I know some people are going to have at tournaments. What if somebody has to go to the bathroom on a time clock? Do you pause it? Does it take
Hell
up their
no.
time?
Yeah, it takes up their time.
Okay, I just want.
The only time that you should be pausing a clock is if a TO has to, or during possibly during like rolling the initiative,
Right.
Because you
when-
can't have it on someone's time for rolling the initiative, right? And then you start it back up.
Yes, on the
Okay.
person who won.
Correct.
I just wanted to see what people's thoughts on potty breaks were.
I think potty breaks are kind of the biggest faux pas. That's kind of like, I always hear drama from other events that somebody you went to the bathroom for 20, 30 minutes. I get it. It happens, right? Like maybe you had some Popeye's chicken the night before, right? And you gotta go take care of business. But in the end, like you shouldn't. Usually, I give everyone a 5 to 10 minute grace period, and I'd be like, "Hey, start a clock. If it gets to this amount of time, keep the clock." And everyone is like, "Oh, we don't have a time clock. I don't have a time clock. There's not a time clock." Well, there's this thing. It's called the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, and you can download one.
It's free.
It's free. So I think people saying that they don't have a time clock is a bunch of malarkey. Because everyone can have one, right? Especially if you just leave one in your room on accident. So what is more about these? Each person is responsible for their own time. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about? Time clocks. This is when I wish we had a listener to ask, be like, "Hey, what about this?"
No, I think we hit pretty much everything. At least in my opinion, I think we've hit everything about time clocks.
We at least hit all the high points on time clocks.
What about the detriments? What do people argue that it's not inclusive?
The only thing that I think people would argue about time
Stress?
clocks is the stress around it, because we are in a hobby that does attract people with autism and maybe some anxiety issues. So that's really the only thing, is people that may say, "Hey, this is going to cause me a lot of anxiety or what have you." But seeing once you start using them, most everybody is going to have that kind of melt away, I believe.
I agree. Once I started using a time clock, it was very simple. Like, I don't think I've actually used a time clock in any actual Kill Team game, but I've trained on one. I've used it for 40K. I know how they function. I don't get stressed out about it. But there are some people that I know of in the Kill Team community that I would use a time clock against.
Yeah.
Just because like they've struggled in the past with, making certain decisions. So like quickly. So, sometimes it's anytime that you pay hundreds of dollars to go to an event, you don't want to shortchange yourself and you don't want to shortchange your opponent. Right.
Right.
So, and you don't want anyone to walk away from the event feeling poorly.
And if you're the type of person that might be a slow player and not know it, you're going to gain a bad reputation as being a slow player.
Agreed. Very much.
And in these kind of hobbies, your reputation as a player goes a long way for kind of goodwill among the community.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I do want to say on time clocks as well is the Kill Team is growing. It's becoming more and more competitive. The events are growing in size. It's going to be the standard probably at some point that you're on a time clock.
Yeah. Except for Games Workshop tournaments. Games Workshop doesn't want people to play with time clocks, specifically because Games Workshop doesn't make time clocks, and possibly because people in the upper echelons don't like time clocks for various reasons, right? But as a competitive standard and as a community, we can come together and push forward time clocks or say no to time clocks, right? At our events, we allow players, if they choose, to use the time clock if they want. And both parties have to abide by, if somebody wants to use it, then they're allowed to.
Now,
right?
what Games Workshop should do is make a servo skull time clock
That would be sick.
with its eyes being your time.
Or it has a projection of the time clock,
Oh,
like a
yeah.
little red one. Yeah, that would be sick.
Games Workshop.
Yeah,
You talk to me.
free money, free ideas.
Pardon
So-
me, bleep.
And then they would start requiring time clocks at their events.
Absolutely, they would. All right, so moving on to another controversial subject is types of dice, the types of dice that you use. So let's get the horse out of the room. Janis, did you find that article from Warhammer Community by chance?
Unfortunately, I didn't. I looked,
Okay.
and the only article I found was one they printed later that was kind of a humorous one about if you use your dice for your faction, you're going to be doing better. Not the one that said, our dice are better.
Yeah. So a year and a half ago, Games Workshop's Warhammer Community came out with an article saying, use our dice are better. Right? This was in May of 2022, I believe, or it was very close to May.
Something like that.
Yeah. So I think when a company objectively comes out, and whether it was satirical or not, comes out and says, use our dice, they're better.
And it's not an April Fool's thing.
Yeah.
This was not an April Fool's gag. It was, like I said, like Dakotah said, after that.
Yeah. I think that there's some objective problems with not only the way that that's being communicated to the public and the definition of it. And now here's the thing. If everyone is using busted Games Workshop dice at their tournaments, then it's all fair, right?
Yeah.
If you suspect that someone has dice that are not fair, the easiest way to mitigate that is just to use their dice.
Yeah, that's an easy one.
It's a very easy one. Stop using your dice and use their dice. Both players can use the same set of dice. Statistically, they'll roll the exact same. If somebody has a dice that they won't let you roll,
There's a problem.
outside of being like superstitious, like if they won't let you roll it, then you can say like, hey, I respectively ask you not to use that dice.
And if not, if they decline, call a TO.
Call a TO, and a TO can then saltwater test it or take any appropriate actions from there. Or tell them that they're not allowed to use those dice in general and give them a different set of dice.
And then if they call a bathroom break, go check the toilet to make sure they didn't try to flush them.
That did happen in 40K recently.
Yes, it did.
And he's an Eldar player too.
And there's a photo online of the dice in the toilet.
There's a video of it, them flushing
there
the
is?
toilet and
Okay.
them not going down because they had lead in them. It's fucking amazing. So dice are very interesting. You should never use a dice that's hard to read. I have these Imperial Fist dice made by Games Workshop that you cannot read.
It's a hot mess.
They're a fist with lightning bolts, and however many lightning bolts are on that side of the fist is the number, and it's very difficult to read. I think. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dakotah. No, go ahead, Dakotah.
There's objectively bad dice made by Games Workshop. The pestilent games,
The Nurgle one.
the Nurgle ones that have
The Death Guard dice.
the Death Guard dice that have
Oh
all
my
the bubbles
God.
in them and stuff. Those actually roll 5 and 6s more often because they're weighted. Not intentionally, it's just the way that they were created. They're actually weighted so that they're lighter on the 5 and 6 side, so they actually roll better for Death Guards.
Yeah,
Death Guard saves.
They are just the Death Guard dice because I have 3 sets of them sitting on my shelf in their box because I'm a huge Death Guard fan.
They're cool
And-
looking.
Oh, they're awesome looking, but I will not use them because they are so skewed when you try to roll.
What about the squig bouncy dice? Those are awesome too.
Yeah, the squig dice that came out for Gloomspite Gits were awesome, but they're so hard to read because you got to read them by their pimples or something.
So
And the 6 is all teeth.
the Spanish MRQ3, I believe MRQ3, that team gives out dice that are pipped in weird ways, and they're very difficult to read. They're not a normal pipped dice. Are
they the weird crazy pips that are like? Yeah, I wanted to get some of those just because they would drive some of my OCD friends crazy.
Yeah, but you should never use those in a tournament because they're like, people can look at your dice and be like 5, 6, 4, 3. Cool. Okay, hit it twice, right? But if you're looking at those dice, you're like, what the fuck am I looking at?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what?
Games Workshop for quite a while had been producing dice as very thematic, but they are so hard to read. There was some Zinch dice that came out that when I was playing 40K at the end of 8th edition, he was using those, and I'm just like, dude, I cannot read those at all because it's the chaos symbol, and then there's like some little thing that you have to look at to see that it's actually the number. It was a nightmare, and I have bad eyes to begin with.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult with a lot of dice. Sometimes, like I have these dice that I make that on the one, they say they are engraved with the word fuck. Right. And people have been like, oh, you rolled a 6. And I'll be like, no, that's a 1 because you want to yell out fuck every time you roll it. Right. So like when you have dice that are different and they don't have the symbol on the 6 side, you need to let your opponents know so they don't automatically think of other things. Right.
Can I interject here with another Games Workshop ism? Mm-hmm. For a while, they were producing dice that had a skull on one for the 1 or the 6. I'm not sure which.
I have some of these.
And like the chapter symbol or something on the other side. And it's like, which is I don't know. And I've been in tournaments where people had done oh no, that's a 6 when it's actually a 1. And then the chapter symbol comes up and they're like, oh no, that's the 6. And it's like, which is it, buddy? Hey, I'm looking at a set of Blood Angels dice that I have here where the Blood Angel symbol is the 6 and a skull is the 1.
Yeah. Another dice that I find unfair are pure metal dice that have pips drilled out. When you do that, you're objectively removing quite a lot of weight from the 5 and 6 side compared to the 1. Right? So if a metal dice is painted or backfilled with another metal or another material, or you have a gemstone dice that has pips removed. Mm-hmm. Objectively, those are going to be lighter on those sides, and maybe that's why they roll well for you, right? Those dice should also not be used at a tournament.
I have a set of metal dice that are made out of aircraft aluminum. Ooh. I know they're perfectly weighted because the company that I bought them from at I forget what the name of it was, but it was when I was living in Salt Lake City. There was a 40K tournament, and this company was there. It was a local company to Salt Lake that made them, and they had one of the precision balance spinny things that the casinos use.
Yeah,
and yeah, you could test the balance there to make sure they were perfectly balanced. But yeah, they were super precise. But I'll never take them to a tournament because unless I buy one of those $70 devices, I can't. Dice testers, I can't say, no, these are perfectly balanced.
Yeah. See, I would trust you, Janis, but I don't know if I would trust somebody that I don't know telling me the same story.
Right.
It's the same thing with there's a reason why you bring the books to Games Workshop's tournaments. Just bring a set of dice that everyone can read quickly and isn't crazy, and you should be fine.
You should.
Yeah. And if somebody has an issue with the dice, let's say you have an issue, because for instance, there are certain colors of dice that I cannot see very well. Certain silvers and reds together, or greens and silvers, or greens and reds, make it specifically difficult for me to read. And I'll ask a player to roll different dice just because I am colorblind. It's not their fault that they chose these awesome dice. I think they're shitty dice because I can't see them.
Right.
People love these dice, right? But like sometimes like if I can't say like I can't tell if that's a 5 or a 3, or
Yeah.
like like I think it's viable for you to ask your opponent as well. Like, hey, like, can we please use different dice because I can't read them? Fair.
Yeah.
Cool beans.
Yeah. I know there's been talk of this, of kind of I wish we would, at some tournaments, not yours, Dakotah. I know you haven't talked to me about this, but saying that, wouldn't it be nice if part of your entry fee was you get a block of 10 dice, and these are the dice you use for the tournament. That way, everybody's using the exact same run of dice that are branded for that tournament, whatever. So people like Baron of Dice or Dakotah would be able to make some extra cash on making dice. But that way, nobody can say, "Oh, my dice were bad," or "His dice were better." They might be suspect. You're just all using the exact same dice.
Yeah, I think that would be a really fun and cool thing to throw in at a tournament for sure.
Yeah, but I know there would be people because people are superstitious about their dice.
They are.
That would be upset by saying, "Oh, I know I can't use my dice."
Yeah, but then you just don't go to that tournament.
Yeah.
I think the only problem is that sometimes the tournament costs. This is one that we don't have written down that I want to talk about. And it's kind of like the increasing costs of tournaments. Increasing costs of tournaments is controversial. But like with inflation, things have to increase because they're just not, like we see it with FLG. We've seen it with ours. We've seen it probably in your own local scenes. Tournaments not costing the $10 or $15 anymore. Right now, whether that's because like the store needs more, or the organizers are finding that they're not making any profit off of these, or so on and so forth, or at least they're not able to pay themselves back for the time and effort that they've put in. I think that those things are something that everyone should keep in mind, is that as long as we are in an unstable economy, I think that, that is always going to continue to happen. Hopefully we start to mellow out here pretty soon. Moving on to the next one. Who wants to talk about this? Start it up.
I will.
Okay.
This one's pretty easy. You're going out in public with a lot of people and you're in close proximity. It doesn't hurt to just remember we have noses. You can take a shower, you can put on some deodorant, you can brush
the
teeth.
teeth.
And if if maybe you ate something for lunch and it's a little stinky, all right, well, gum is there, mints are there, lifesavers are there. It doesn't happen so much, but it does happen at least once at each event.
It happens enough.
It happens enough that this is a thing. And not just at Kill Team. You got them at every kind of event. I've played all sorts of competitive games.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, it's not just a Warhammer thing. Being a veteran of many RPG cons and things like that, it's a thing. And there's the opposite side of things of people that like bathe in Axe body spray at events.
Mm-hmm. It's not clean. It's just smelly.
It wasn't a Kill Team player at LVO, but I was walking around the vendor area, and wow, they loved their Axe. I'll just say that.
Yeah, and I think it does become a little bit more difficult because of COVID. Maybe they had COVID recently, they can't spell themselves.
Right.
But just be cognizant and aware of those things whenever you go to a tournament, just to be like, hey, did I shower? Did I make sure I put deodorant on? Do I need to stop at Walgreens and get deodorant? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I forgot it at home, so on and so forth.
And we are in a close proximity where people can smell your breath and everything because you're talking close. And typically loud because it's in a big event hall where a lot of people talking. So I always carry either cough drops or or something and pop one before each game, just to be sure that I'm a little bit on the fresh side.
Absolutely.
So, another thing that we should talk about is toxic sportsmanship and angle shooting. G, do you want to lead off on this one too?
I also want to lead off on this one too. There's nothing worse than being somebody who's brand new to a game, brought in by somebody new, by somebody who's already been playing, just so that that old player can get an easy win. Mm-hmm. And it's the worst when it's at tournaments, when we've already mentioned you're paying a certain amount to go to this event. You don't really have a lot of time to play the game, so maybe this is like the weekend day. The kids are being taken care of, and I'm able to take time off to go do this, or my busy schedule allows me to take this day. And you just get rocked by all these players who are taking advantage of you because you're new, and that doesn't feel good at all.
Absolutely. I think that I think you said it was social engineering.
That is correct.
So a way that more experienced players kind of can tell other players what to do to quote unquote score max points and do these kinds of things to ensure that that player is still winning and helping the other person out, I find an issue, right? Like, sure, being helpful is great. Helpful is awesome. And usually it leads to good times, but not always, right? There is another side of that same story, right? Janis, have you ever played somebody who was a toxic sportsmanship or that has done any kind of angle shooting against you?
I've played against a few people that have done some things I'd consider that kind of thing. One of the things that I don't really appreciate is when there is coaching from somebody when they're playing.
We should never have coaching ever.
No, you should never have that, because that is very, very bad. Because there's been a few that I was at where I was playing, and somebody that might be done with their game would come up and tap their opponent on the shoulder and pull them aside and do some whisper, and then look at the board and whisper. So they're kind of telling them something that they could possibly do, which is it was just serious bad form.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's something to do. And then you have the people that are a little suspect with the trying to be super nice and doing things that you can tell they're trying to set something up or kind of do some razzle dazzle to conceal some other shady moves they might be doing.
Reminding me of a recent YouTube video.
Yep.
There could be some of that. But yeah, the kind of not bait and switch, but razzle dazzle would be kind of the better term for it.
Yeah, kind of obfuscating certain movements or telling a player they're going to be doing something while they're doing something with their other hand, right? Yeah. To obfuscate something else. Angle shooting is like the act of using underhanded or unfair methods to take advantage of inexperienced opponents. All right. And angle shooting and cheating is very similar, but angle shooting is not considered cheating. Just it doesn't breach that realm, but it's pretty close. So
but
for
instance, it is definite bad form.
Oh yeah, it's definitely horrible sportsmanship, right? So like anything that you can do to gain an advantage, you're going to do. So for instance, you would improperly use a clock. You would see that you're going to win, so you start slowing down on turning point 3 when technically 3 and 4 are the faster turning points. You would do stuff like, hey, you would tell somebody like, hey, what is the barricade one again? Okay. And then you play the one that defeats the barricade. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like there are like underhanded ways of manipulating opponents that you should just stay away from. Like just play a clean and honest game. And I feel that a lot of this episode has probably been more negative towards these things, but it is a controversial episode where we have to talk about some of these harder things that we've experienced or seen in the tournament scene. These are not everything that we've talked about today so far is not the norm for tournaments.
Right.
But they exist and they have happened. All right. So remember that when you go into a tournament, 95% of the people that you're going to play are going to be amazing. Right. You might get one guy or woman who's like not your favorite person to play and you would prefer not to play them again just because maybe it's just, the way you play the game. That's going to be normal. That happens in life. You're going to meet people that you just objectively don't like, right?
And you're going to everybody has a bad day. Are you going to meet that player when they're having a bad day?
Yes, exactly. Did they just realize that they are out of top contention and this was very important for them? Like all sorts of stuff, right?
I'm not innocent in that realm. I've had some matches where I've been very salty, and I apologize to my opponents in those games. But I mean, it happens. Somebody can just be having a bad day.
It does happen.
It does happen. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things that, we can also look at. Sometimes like you might just have a bad game. Like one time, like my worst form of sportsmanship was probably recently was at a game that, a tournament that I won best sportsmanship at. It was at KTO. Right. And, there was a player next to me and we were nuts to butts at that tournament. Everyone was right next to each other. It was a COVID happy zone. Right.
And I didn't hear of anybody getting COVID after that event.
Yeah, no one, not to my event knowledge, no one did. But like their dice tray was on my side of the mat, and I broached it very abruptly and be like, "Hey, man, could you not have this on my mat? You could put it on yours." And the way I broached it was very abrupt, and I feel rude, right? Mm-hmm. And it didn't really like get that better because I had to sit next to them the whole time. And it also doesn't help that person, I don't think, liked me in the first place, but that's okay. Not everyone has to like me either, right? You either love me or you hate me. It's one of the two.
Right.
Yeah. Moving on to the next point. Stopping players from calling TOs. This is a big one. I consider this one very, very highly. I have seen one too many times people stopping other players from calling a TO. If you have a rules question, we are TOs, tournament organizers, judges are there to make sure the game is run correctly and smoothly. If you don't think that a rule is being used correctly, it is not a big deal to call a TO. If your opponent is telling you not to call a TO, that is a red flag. Or saying like, no, I'm a veteran. I know this rule. Mm-hmm. I know this. This is a part of toxic sportsmanship, right? If somebody is so confident in every single rule and you just don't agree with them, like my wife runs into this a lot because she's a woman and people will over explain things or talk to her this way and say, no, I know the rule. And she's like, I don't think that you do. And you pull out your book.
I've encountered this myself.
Yes.
Sorry that this happened.
Yeah. So like, and if that person is like, no, we don't need a TO. No, we don't need a TO. And then when they're like, oh, I'm going to call a TO anyways. And they're like, no, we'll just run it your way. It's fine. If it's that big of a deal to you, we'll run it your way. Right? Like, then why would you arguing in the first place? Like, that's a red flag for how the rest of the game is going to go. Because like somebody might know like how conceal is done. Maybe you don't understand the rule as much as them. call a TO over. We're fine. That's what we're there for.
Yeah.
If you don't call us, we're bored. We're not doing anything.
Well,
right?
From the player side on this, there just seems to be a stigma about calling a TO over. And calling a TO isn't a bad thing, which people just don't seem to get. It's like, do I need to bring the principal over? It's like, no, it's not. You're not tattling on somebody. You're just asking for a clarification. That's what Dakotah and any TO is there for.
Yep.
Absolutely. I think that's a hard thing for some people to wrap their heads around, right? But it's definitely something that needs to be in your thought process, for sure. And
there, for newer players, when you are playing against somebody that's a tournament veteran, people that are known in the community, if you're questioning something, still bring a TO over. Just because they're somebody that's well regarded in the community doesn't mean they're not getting something wrong.
Exactly. I think this is something that I can speak to quite heavily. There's been people in the scene before that have been these experts, and it turns out that they were misplaying many, many rules and getting away with it because of their ego, because of their personality, and because of things that they have had in the past, whether it be YouTube, Instagram, tournament wins, first places, doesn't matter, Patreons. Some players get things wrong, and sometimes they use their famedom or their perceived famedom in order to push through things that are not correct. And I know this because I have seen it. I have dealt with it as a TO, and those have all been rectified to my knowledge currently. This is something that is very important for new players to remember and think of as well, is that just because you're playing somebody they're all human. Some people are going to get some things wrong.
Yep.
Maybe they didn't sleep the night before, right? Make sure you can call a TO over and make sure that you feel comfortable doing that. We are there to make sure that everyone has a good time. We want everyone to keep coming to these tournaments, right? We never ever want somebody to ever feel like they can't come to one of us and talk to us, or if they've had a bad experience, come and tell us, because the only way that we will know if somebody's going to be a problem or is a problem in the community is if people tell us. There's been too many times where people don't say anything for 6 or 7 months, and you're like, oh, okay, now people are coming out of the woodwork and saying that this person has been a problem. All right. It's not a tattletale. We're just all trying to make and live in this game and be as objective and fun as possible. Right.
And kind of a positive of calling a TO over is that interaction is going to stick with you for a little bit longer than if someone just tells you a rule. So it's actually a learning thing. I remember more things about rules that I may have gotten wrong because of a TO interaction.
Yeah. And sometimes those things are like, wow, or even the TO doesn't know, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, well, we'll play it like this. I'm going to go figure it out, and I'll come back and let you guys know the actual ruling. But right now, just play it this way. Okay.
Yeah. Because the example, I'll give 2 examples, one that happened to me and one that happened to some other people that I know. For me, it was knowing about when stun wears off versus in the turning point that we had a conversation. It's like, oh, wait, doesn't it end at the end of the turn, or does it end on their next activation? When does it end? And we didn't know. And so we had a TO come over, and they're like, well, I don't know either. I need to look this up.
Mm-hmm.
So we figured it out after that.
Well, what was the answer, Janis?
The answer is anytime it's at the end of the person's turn, their next activation, it wears off like any other -2 APL or plus the APL.
Yeah.
The one that came up, I think, who was it? Nick probably mentioned it on here, was at Nova this year, the fusillade rule.
Oh, yeah.
With the heavy bolter and the interaction with the not savior protocol, but protect your leader kind of thing.
Mhm.
Because I honestly wouldn't have known Fusillade could be used that way, and I would have called a T over as well.
That was such a weird interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was, I think, with save the leader. If nothing hit the other guy, then he used it to retarget the leader, right?
Yeah, because Fusillade, you move it from whoever's the target, not just the target takes everything.
Yeah, which is fascinating. So, like, these small rules and these things usually come up at a tournament, and that's kind of like the TO's kind of main thought too, of like, hey, I learned this, this, and this. Because we're not infallible either. We've got rules wrong before. We've played things wrong before. It's just as much of a learning experience for some of these really complicated rules for the TO as it is the players. Because the TO is going to know the majority of rules. They're not going to know everything. Because we have, 37 teams, 39 teams with the two new, with the Blades of Cain and the Scouts coming out soon, hopefully.
I'm hoping those rumors are not true.
Yeah. Well, we've mentioned it. We might as well say it real quick. The rumor that Valrak and then Glass Half Dead echoed was that the next box set isn't going to be coming out until January because of whatever reason. People are saying shipping delays. My initial thought process of hearing that is like, well, Games Workshop has already made a gross profit this year that they've had to pay out a bunch of people. Maybe they're delaying some stuff. Maybe it's a little bit of everything. Who knows?
Dakotah's opinions are his own on this.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we're it's going to be exciting. I hope we get them next week.
Yeah.
That'd be dope.
I'm hoping to see them sooner, but I really hope it's not going to be delayed until January, because that's going to be over 6 months without any kill team.
Yeah, I have because we'll have to talk about this in our LVO episode.
Yeah.
If they're not out until like mid-January, are we going to allow them at LVO? Right? Like, are we going to break our 2-week rule to allow these two teams? It's going to be interesting. I think that I'd be willing to take it down to 1 week for these specific two teams. I do think it depends on the rules, though. If they come out and they're like previous Felgor, we may just be like, nah, we'll keep it at 2 weeks.
Like, I could see us doing the 1 week, just because like people already technically own these models. Like, you could use the other scouts, you could use all the metal Eldar.
Yes.
So like, I could see it, but we'll make that decision when we get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully you guys won't have to make that decision. But anyway, before we got off on the topic of rumors and speculation.
Yes. We'll move to commission painting winning the best painted without letting the staff know or giving credit to commission painters. So
I believe this is just kind of a scummy tactic to win a best painted thing, to be honest.
G, you have the biggest thought process on this, so why don't you lead us, homie?
Yes, just to give you a little bit of reasoning as to why I feel this way. The hobby is the most important thing for me. It is the thing I can control. It is the thing I practice, and I know it's a thing a lot of people like to do in their spare time. They practice, they get better, they think of really cool themes. And when you go to a tournament just to get it, like, you enter, you're putting all this effort into making a display board into a team. You spent the last 3 months putting it together or something. You kept it in secret. You didn't want anybody to know about it, and you're going to reveal it to make like a big old splash. Only for it to lose out to like a super mega professional because someone else had more money. Like, man, someone took a shit in your heart. Like, it just feels bad.
Agreed.
And there's nothing worse than people who would abuse that. It's fine to have a commission painted army. There's nothing wrong with that. I just don't believe you should be using someone else's work to win without properly mentioning who it is, or just
or if
telling,
that person is also there at
yeah,
that
like
tournament.
you could tell them that was the guy who painted it, so they probably should be the one getting the credit. Or you could be nice enough to tell the people who are judging, I didn't do this. This is the person, or just know that I paid for this. It was not out of my work, and that's always scummy to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it's something to be aware of and make sure that like commission painted teams are dope. They're cool. They're awesome. We're not saying to not do that. It's just like, hey, just make sure you let the organizers know if something is commission painted, right?
Yeah, especially when it's going to, especially when there's prize support on the line for the best painted thing.
Absolutely. There's not a lot to talk about outside of that for these.
Yeah, and well, just talking about commission. I mean, just kind of my own personal take on commission painting. These are my own thoughts. Don't take this. Anyone that does things to get or pays people to paint their models for them. I am happier with myself when I'm playing a team that I painted, that I put my time in, did the work. It might not be the best painting in the world, but you know what? I did this. These are my miniatures. They're not someone else's miniatures that I'm playing with, because that's how I feel about things that I use that might have been painted by somebody else.
Yeah, it's funny. Do I still have it? So when I was 5, when I was, I think 10, when I started playing the game, the Avatar of Cain was my favorite model.
Right.
And I didn't know why I couldn't paint red very well, right? This old little metal stempy model that you could throw at somebody and probably get a murder charge for.
He's not as bad as the old dreadnoughts.
No, he's not. My son recently got my old metal dreadnought and ripped off his leg. I was like, how did you do that?
That's some strong. That's a strong child you got there.
Yeah, he's a big boy. So like, I actually was uncomfortable enough that I wanted this model to be like the best painted thing that I had. He charged me like $40 back in the day. He painted it. I look at it now and it's not good.
Right.
But back then it was the standout piece to my team and my army. And I've since repainted pieces of him because I didn't know I was colorblind when I was repainting the red. I was like, this red doesn't look right. So I repainted it just one shade of red. I was like, I like this red better. Cool. I have no idea if the other red was better or not. But like, when that's, I could get a whole colorblind tangent of why the Avatar of Cain is so cool, but he's so hard for me to paint. So hard. And I think that like, I commission paint teams, right? Commission paints. It's not a bad thing to get your teams commissioned, especially if you're like, I just want something pretty to look at. I want something pretty to play on the table. I don't have the time to do this. It's completely fine to do.
Oh yeah. And I get it with people that they want to play the game. They don't want to do the hobby side of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some people hate the hobby.
I hate putting not me, but somebody who I hate painting models. I hate putting together models. I hate basing models. Someone else do it for me. I just want to play the game. Hey, more power to you. But don't try to take credit for that other guy's work.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
So moving on to our last 3 things.
Dun dun dun.
Let's move on to tape measures. This was pretty controversial for a while. A lot of people were using them. It seems as over this game has evolved, tape measures seem to be a lot less used. There are some players out there who still use tape measures, but I found the majority of people have been using the actual tools of the game. Maybe it's because I give a lot of free tools out at our tournaments. But I find that the use of tape measures has gone down. I know that other organizers from other areas and other countries have reached out to me and asking like, hey, we've had issues with people using tape measures. Should we ban them? I reached out to people that I know and trust and asked them the same thing when I was having problems with tape measures. And the overall consensus was no. It's way too... I think it's way too much to come out and say you should not be using a tape measure. Tape measures are probably the easiest form of measuring something out, especially like a difficult charge. But the problem is you have to account for bases. You have to account for these things. But it's also not the tournament organizer's responsibility to police your opponents. You as a player should be doing that. Being like, hey, make sure I see you using a tape measure. Please be aware that you need to measure in 1-inch increments around terrain and all that kind of stuff, clearing bases. I think it's actually harder for players who use tape measures because it's a lot harder to get an accurate representation of this form of the game in general. What about you, Janis? Do you think we should ban tape measures?
I don't think they should be banned because I go both ways on using tape measure and measuring tool. I rarely use tape measure, but for certain things I will break it out and use it, especially when I'm doing something that has an extra inch of movement, because it's hard. I don't have 3 arms. I can't do the have 3 measuring gauges out to do that. So I'll
there's
crank out the tape measure.
There's these new base steppers.
I've heard about them.
that I make from Luster's Workshop. Candy Roller Crit did a shout out on one of his videos and his podcast for us. So that was very nice of you, John. Thank you. But yeah, we make them and they're quite useful. But you don't have to have multiple, or you don't have to be a gene stealer to use those, Janis. I'll send you some when I custom make you a tray. Okay.
All right. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it should be banned, but in Kill Team, I definitely see the use for tape measures going down drastically.
Yeah, I think that tape measures have been abused a lot in the past. And I think that it is something that every TO should look at. Players who are using tape measures, just make sure that they are measuring correctly.
Yeah.
Because you have to do it from well above the models. You're going to hit terrain if you don't. They're 3 inches in the back usually.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure that players are using them correctly. You're inviting watching eyes when you use tape measures.
The one negative thing I have to say about tape measures is I've seen terrain go flying way too often when someone retracts it.
Yes.
Or models going flying.
Yeah. Same with
do the
rolling
snapping.
on the table.
Yeah.
Same thing with rolling on tables.
Yeah.
But I'm going to just go back to start using the old 18-inch red stick that Games Workshop used to
Oh, no, the whipping stick. No.
I remember
as a kid, just making the noise.
my first one I chewed on a lot.
Oh,
I wish I still had it though, because those things from 3rd edition were sick.
I have so many of those red sticks around my place.
We'll trade.
Because they came with everything back then. They came with all the new sets, any of the box games, all had the red sticks.
Yeah, I also like the clear ones that they've come out with, Games Workshop, the Mylar ones that are printed.
Oh yeah,
yeah, those ones are also pretty nice. What about cocked dice? So, I think I think that players, if you're not using a dice tray, should always talk about what is a cocked dice, because there is a specific definition of what a cocked dice is, and then there's also things that you can agree at the table, right? So do you agree that anything that's not flat is considered a cocked dice, so you always re-roll it no matter what the thing is? Do you always roll in a dice tray, and if nothing, the only dice that count are inside the dice tray? Are you rolling on the dice mat? Because that in the battlefield, that used to be a really big thing. And when we started playing 40K way back in the day.
Yeah, that's more of a 40K thing.
Yeah, rolling dice on the terrain. The problem is that when you start doing that, people can hide dice behind terrain. They can hide dice. It's a problem. Or the actual definition of a cocked dice, to my knowledge, is if you roll a dice and it's cocked where you can't place another dice of the same type on top and it stay, then it's, if it stays, it's not cocked. If it rolls off, it's cocked and you could re-roll it.
Yeah. The stack test.
Yeah, the stack test. So, how do you roll dice, Janis, at tournaments?
Okay, so before every game, I have my purple dice tray out with the Pop Goes the Monkey logo in it. It's a sticker I put in. Everyone asks me, "Where'd you get the Pop Goes the Monkey dice tray?" It's like, no, it's
I was
not.
about to ask you that.
To my knowledge, he doesn't make it. It's just a sticker that I put down on the top of the vinyl on my dice tray. I always say, here's how I roll dice. If it pops out of the tray, it's a dead die. If it's even slightly cocked, I re-roll it. So even if it's on a corner and I could stack another die on it, I re-roll it even if it's slightly cocked. Just to get that out there, that there's no questions about what's a cocked die.
Yeah.
That I say everything has to land flat in the bottom of the tray. And if a dice happens to land on top of another dice, I re-roll the dice that was on top.
It's always impressive when that happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those ones are weird. I was just playing 40K yesterday, and that happened a bunch. It's because we don't have the space to roll.
Yeah. How about you, G? What do you do?
I like to generally designate a space that we're going to be rolling in. I prefer to have one if we can. So like a staging area or use a box.
Mm-hmm.
That way, okay, we know where it lands. That's the official spot. If it falls out, cool, roll it again. And if it's cocked in the corner or something, all right, you can usually tell, or you do the stack test like we mentioned, re-roll that dice, and make sure your opponent sees it before you pick it up. Like they go, that's a cocked dice, right? Cool. All right, I'm going to re-roll this. It's as easy as that. Communication is usually an answer to a lot of these problems.
Yeah, and I've had so many opponents say, "Oh, thank you for doing that. I'll do the same thing."
Yes.
So
we're looking out for each other.
Yeah, putting that out there, a lot of people that I've encountered with it are 100% like, okay, cool. We got that. We got that out of the way. It's not going to be an issue if there is something.
People love rules. People will add rules. I have my own dice tray that we sell at events that I use. So that's typically what I roll in. And if anything comes out, it doesn't count. I offer it to my opponents. Sometimes they have their own dice trays. Sometimes they take it. I always tell them how I'm going to roll, and then usually they respond of how they like to roll. And then, that's just how we all roll.
Yeah. That's how we roll.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Let me cook. Sorry, Anthony. All right.
But yeah,
if you younger community,
if you put that out there saying how you're going to do it, either people will abide by what you've said, or they'll tell you how they roll.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to two others, things, one of which is slow play. Now, Janis, have you ever felt like you were slow played at a tournament?
Yes.
Okay.
I've malicious slow play once, unintentional slow play a few times. There is one particular time where it was at a tournament. It was an open-ended time. They didn't give us any hard time limits, and it was a Custodes on Custodes match that went 2.5 hours.
Oh my Lord. Was it like 8 Custodes?
Yes, it was 8 Custodes on the table.
Wow.
So you guys had a total, what's 8 times 4?
32 actions.
32 activations took 2.5 hours. Okay.
Yeah. My whole activation time in that event was probably 30 minutes, I'll just say.
I think I know who you're talking about. Okay. So 2.5 times 60. Yes, I don't want to do math. Divided by 32 equals
7.
4.5 minutes per activation. That's impressive.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. On average. And then you said how much time did you think you took up?
Probably about a half hour of that time for everything that I did.
That's exciting. So 16 so let's just see here. 120 divided by 16 activations, 7.5 minutes per activation. That's a long time.
Yeah.
Long time. It's almost, that's it's just a little bit ridiculous. So
Yeah.
Janis, in the future, now that we've talked about time clocks, you feel more comfortable with time clocks, and you feel comfortable calling TOs.
Yes.
If this thing happened again, when would you call a TO, or how would you deal with this problem if it sprung up once again?
If this game is a serious edge case, but given how that game was going, if it was at a large tournament now, I would have called a TO over midway through turning point 1 saying, hey, we have a problem here.
So about how long, because at SoCal Open, there's an issue with certain, I think, unintentional slow play. Players were taking some players were on multiple occasions taking 40 minutes to set up, or 30 minutes to set up, or 45 or 50 minutes, which is almost half of your game length.
Yeah.
You should only take 10 minutes to explain your team, both players, and deploy. Maybe 15 minutes max. 20 minutes max to explain who your team is, what they do, and fully deploy before you start round 1.
Yeah, that's kind of beyond the pale in my opinion. I mean, if it's taking that long to deploy, I would have probably been salty and talked to a TO about, dude.
Yeah. It takes about, I think like at Nova, there was an hour and 15 minute deployment phase for one game.
Yeah.
It's absurd. Absolutely absurd. I know it was a Commandos mirror match, but
I get being meticulous, but you're really biting into your opponent's time. If you're not on a time clock, here's where time clocks is going to be I think will help minimize this kind of behavior. Whenever you're looking at, I only have 15 minutes of playtime, and my opponent has 40 minutes still.
Yeah. And also, like, you can objectively see if you are a problem, if you have been a problem, right? You can say like, oh, wow, I do need to speed up my play.
Yeah, because then you're looking at the time clock going, oh, I only have 15 minutes of playtime.
Yeah. I feel that if I got a 30-minute warning, or if deployment took 40 minutes, I'd be like, hey, man, this took way too long. I have to start a time clock. To ensure that we both get the same amount of activations. And would it suck for me playing Vet Guard compared to somebody else, like if they were playing like Legionary? Yeah, but at that point in time, like how long would you take in order to call a TO? Like, I know that you said halfway through turning point 1, but if they took 40 minutes to deploy, Janis, you're looking at an hour and 20 minutes gone by.
If they're calling out, I mean, typically what? LVO is an hour and a half rounds?
No, they're 2-hour rounds.
They were 2-hour rounds?
Yeah.
If we're still in deployment when the 1 hour left comes around, that's a definite
automatic time clock.
We need to do something here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, half hour. I mean, I might say something to the other players saying, "Hey, dude, you're taking a lot of time here," but I wouldn't call a TO over at that point. I mean, with recent things and how some people have been at events, I'm not calling out any names. I mean, if you know, you know. But certain people I would definitely be putting on a clock or having a little less patience with.
I think that's another good thing for newer players to know, is to have like an objective standard of like, hey, this is actually taking too long. So like whether it's yourself or whether it's your opponent, you can be like, hey, bud, like this is actually like wrong and we need to like correct it and speed up, because like ultimately like this is a tournament. We want to make sure that we're both getting a fair shot at what is going to happen during the tournament.
If you're not rolling dice within 45 minutes of the round start, something's wrong.
Yeah, something's very wrong. And then if you get like, if you're in the middle of turning point 1, or if you end in the turning point 2, I've seen a lot of people end turning point 2 in 2 hours. That is also like not great.
Yeah, and that hurts. Even if you win that game as the slow player, or whoever wins that game is going to be at a disadvantage in the standings.
You won 8 points to 4 points.
Yeah,
you know,
because with a lot of events going off of strength of schedule at this point, yeah, your strength of schedule is going to tank, and you're going to be out of contention. So slow play is not a good thing.
That's another reason why I have issues with slow play. Your fate is not in your own hands, but we won't get to that. That's a TO gripe. Moving on to, do you guys have any? Well, I should ask G. G, do you have any instances of slow play?
I don't, but I have this story.
Okay.
That's been told from someone I know. A person who is can sort of see through their eyes. They're notoriously known to slow play. But when you introduce a time clock, suddenly they know exactly how to do it with their limited vision. Mm-hmm. That's all I can really say.
Yeah. You're talking about me, aren't you, G?
Exactly. And so that was a fun thing to hear about and to actually see. You know, you get to notice it. So it's just you see examples of it. I've been fortunate enough to not have to play with slow players.
You're also very fast, Giacomo.
I am. Yeah, if James Robinson and I are playing, we're done in 30 minutes.
You guys make decisions. And
Gee, you and I need to play then to see if we can get like Speed Hammer in here.
25-minute game. Ball playing intercession. Cool. Deploy.
What'd I do? Forward. Shoot. He didn't die. All right. Next turn. Let's go.
I'm sure we could hammer out a game within 30 minutes.
Easily,
easy.
Yeah.
Easy.
So maybe at LVO between games we can get a game.
Yeah, maybe actually that'd be pretty fun.
Let's have a show match on Thursday. Let's get the stream set up early.
Hey, I'm down.
I'm down.
All right, speed kill team. How many games can we get in this amount of time? Yeah. So let's move on to types of terrain at events. I think the objective. General, what everyone mostly uses these days is Octarius throughout the world. And
it is the ubiquitous kill team terrain.
Correct.
It is. I would say so.
I hate Scramble. Moving to, and then there's also Into the Dark. I think that those are the two most widely accepted competitive formats of terrain.
Right.
Is there anything else other than what we use, MDF? Like our terrain, my terrain spoke to the community, and I specifically designed for this version of Kill Team. Heaven forbid they ever release another form of Kill Team, and I have to restart my terrain collection. might actually
GW, please no.
might actually be very upset. But I also feel like there are events that run other types of terrain that are just viable in the store, right? If you're going to run a tournament, there's not enough Octarius, there's not enough this. Maybe you've bought all of the Chalnith stuff too, so you run everything. As a TO, I've attended those kind of events, and it's very important to let your players know before you show up and you're like, oh, why is Morok here? Why is this here? Why is this here? You want to let players know exactly what they're walking into, what they're paying for, and why they're coming to your event. You don't want to surprise somebody to make them upset later. Janis, you're about to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say the completely random terrain. You're typically going to see that more at your local stores, which I don't think that's a big issue, really, or a big thing. So, like, if it's a 16-player tournament at a local shop, I don't feel that they need to jump out and say, hey, this is going to be just what we got in the store versus we're using all GW terrain.
Yeah.
But like a big, like 24 person and up, I feel they should have a little bit of an idea of what the terrain setup is going to be like.
Yeah. I think the problem for TOs is that I think that terrain has a shelf life. So people either get bored of it or it goes out of style and GW stops using it.
And one of the things with using the same terrain set over and over again is with the same kind of layouts is your game becomes very formulaic.
Yes.
I'm going to move here. I'm going to do this. They're going to move. I'm going to move here. I'm going to do this. Because that's one issue that I'm running into personally with Into the Dark is it's become very chess-like.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about it.
It's very, very chess-like. I think that's one reason why me and G created the asymmetrical Into the Dark layouts is because it added a little bit of spice, right?
I'm looking forward to playing those because I love the close confines type games, but running into so many current Into the Dark with the Games Workshop setups, it's like, oh, okay, I'm playing this map. I know the exact move sets I need to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was really hoping that GW was going to come out with more maps, or hopefully they still do, more maps for Into the Dark, whether they're asymmetrical or not. But I will tell you, it is very difficult to make asymmetrical layouts with this terrain because every single piece is symmetric. And they can only be put together viably and competitively so many ways.
Yeah, that's the only downside with the way they built the terrain set is I was actually hoping it would have been more like the old Zone Mortalis stuff, which was just lock pieces locked together like Lego bricks, kind of.
Yeah. I think that the old Cities of Death terrain that GW produced back in like 2008 through 2012 or 14.
Yes, it was 7th and 8th edition.
Is probably the best plastic terrain out there currently for this game. It's really hard to get a hold of.
I could see that.
Yeah, but it was so modular. You could cut it in any different way. You could put it on MDF bases. It was just a miraculous modular terrain building tool, right? I'm sad that I sold mine when I got married, but I'd rather be married and paid for my wedding than have that terrain still.
Understandable.
Yeah.
People getting rid of stuff. I know nothing of this. I have a whole room of shame to myself.
You have 3 copies of Rogue Trader.
I do. Yeah, kind of an aside here when people were talking about because we listen to the podcast. I save the podcasts and listen to them when I'm traveling up to my parents', which is about 2.5 hours to drive to. And I'll put on the podcast and I'll listen to them in the car. I don't care what my kids or wife says about it. But they listen, they comment. So, but when you guys, I think the last one we listened to that someone mentioned their pile of shame was Nick and saying about his corner of stuff that was his pile of shame. And I just started laughing and Kathy's like, I know exactly what you're thinking. These people with their small piles of shame.
Giacomo.
I liquidate mine, yeah.
they know nothing.
G has seen mine and it's big enough for the both of us.
It's in his whole room, dude.
It's up high. It's hiding.
If I could get Kathy down here to talk about it, and because she comments, because we have a finished basement and one room is like old box sets that still have shrink wrap on them.
That's amazing.
Okay. I have a original box Predator tank still in shrink wrap.
That's part metal, right?
Nope, that's all plastic.
That's all plastic?
This is the original Predator. The original.
Oh, without the las cannon upgrades?
It has the autocannon and two las cannons. The turret looks like a Dalek, kind of.
Yeah.
I have
the ball thing.
I'm looking up. Hold on, I'm going to stand up. I have original Space Marine Scouts still in plastic wrap, and I have Corn Demons and the old Chaos Cult still in plastic wrap. Everything else has been at least semi-opened. Other than that,
I have a whole Morty and Iron Guard army still in blister pack.
Dang.
Oh, nice
Dang.
blister packs, man. Those
Holy
Yeah.
crap.
are fucking sick.
That I'm,
That's
that I'm actually looking at potentially liquidating at some point. So if anyone's interested in some Morty and Iron Guard, go ahead and
Keep
talk
me,
to
keep me in the loop. Keep me in the loop.
Yeah, you can talk to these guys. They can put us in touch.
Morty and Iron Guard. That's sick. I remember getting old blisters of like Swooping Hawks for like $8.
Mhm.
But having to get like 5 sets in order to get a full
You get
team.
like, you get like 2 per
Just
blister
2.
or something.
Just
yeah.
2. Yeah.
I remember those days.
And then I remember like the price increase list used to seem so much more massive every time the metal blisters had to go up. And now I just like walk into stores and I see like stores still have like old metal blisters that they're still charging like $20 or $28 for. And you're like, oh,
some of the blister packs I have the old store price on it, and it's like $6.50 for 2 miniatures. And it's like
amazing.
Yeah, it's like, wow, where we have gone.
Inflation is a real thing, and also Games Workshop profits are a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am happy about how well Games Workshop is doing and has been doing, because there was a good amount of time that, you know, they were looking too hot.
7th edition, man.
Yeah, the end of 6th and 7th edition
was a rough time.
Yeah, it was I watched a podcast, I think it was about contrast paint and how contrast paint really kind of helped save them.
Oh yeah, that was Peachy's video?
I think so. I think it was like
because Peachy's doing a video a YouTube series with a bunch of old GW people.
Yes.
And I think that was the one that Contrast saved Games Workshop.
Yeah, it was a good episode too. I was like, oh, this is
Contrast wasn't what saved Games Workshop, but it was
helped.
in the works during that time.
Yeah. Definitely a revolutionary paint. In fact, I love contrast. Not everyone does, but I really, really like that style of paint. It's not an end all be all, but
I'm a convert. I love it.
I like a good amount of the range. There's useful tools.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's a useful tool. I haven't gotten rid of any of my regular base paints or layer paints, but it's a new tool for the toolbox.
Speaking of which, have you guys seen the newest viral trend? I think it's called Space Marine Goo or Space Marine Gunk or Wash or something. Space Gunk. What is it called?
No, I haven't.
Gee, have you seen that traveling around the interwebs?
No.
So it's 1/3 Lamian medium, 1/3 Army Painter dark tone, which I actually really like their dark tone. And
yeah, I like it too.
I think it's 1/3 Reichland Flesh Shade, and people are like all jazzed about it on YouTube and TikTok. I know a way to make that way better really quickly.
So what's it supposed to do?
It's supposed to be like a new kind of like wash. It's like a light. Supposed to be the new Agrax Earth Shade, quote unquote.
Okay,
but I don't know why you just use their brand new stuff. Maybe.
They did change the chemical composition. So I know some people were like, hey, do you have an original pot? I want to buy an original pot.
Oh, I see. It stains a little bit more. Like the new stuff they use contrast medium in. So it sinks into the cracks a little bit more. I know a way to make it way better. You just don't use Lamian medium and you use the contrast medium instead. Contrast medium, in my opinion, is the best medium available.
Oh, hands down. Hands down.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very easily accessible to hobbyists. I would agree.
Yeah.
I still use it.
I've tried like so many different things. And to me, it's still the best. But you guys have any other hobby tips to give to these people before we round out?
Yes. If you're going to glaze, have a paper towel with you. Because you more than likely have too much water on your paintbrush. And it's just, you just need to tap it lightly to get some of that water off. It will go on your paper towel. and then you can glaze a little bit easier.
It's a good one, G. I like
It's a good one. Something from me. This is more of a safety tip than anything. Since we are going into the winter months, be sure when you're doing rattle can priming, be sure you are in a ventilated area and not near any sources of flame, those that burn coal or wood.
I have another one. I really like using micron pens for script and for like the very dot of an iris, like the smallest inner part. Like if you do like a blue like eyeball.
Are those the things that people use for Gundams for panel tracing?
Yes and no. These are like really, really, really fine tipped pens. I think that this does come from the Gundam stuff. I think that they use these.
You can buy some, but then I used to buy microns from Blix when I used to use them for the eyeballs. But since I've been working on my control of a brush, I want to see if I have an image of one where I use the micron pen. God, that must have been like 3 years ago.
While he's looking that up, just a little aside for my safety tip. We had a tiki torch outside, and I was priming things, and there was a bit of fire. I'll just say that.
Oh no! Oh no!
I got a little too close with the rattle can.
Wow, Janis, that is the OG Predator.
Yeah, I told you.
Yeah,
and the Horse Heresy one has the ball now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is before mine. But when I got into the hobby, they had blue boxes, which was in third edition.
This is the old red box. I guess it's not the original box, which was like
fucking close enough.
Yeah, but that's the second edition box for it, and I have one still in shrink wrap.
Amazing.
That's pretty nuts to have something like that in the collection.
Yeah, and I had two of them. This will tell you how things have gone up. I bought two of them for $20.
Two of them for $20, man! What a time!
Yeah, that was 95. I want to say 94, maybe.
That's back when gas used to be $1, though. So
yeah, that is.
We've come a long way, much like we've come a long way on this episode on the Squad Games podcast. Didn't think I was going to say the intro, but I did it anyway.
Dun, dun, dun. We've been all over the place in this episode.
Yeah. All over the place, but mainly about tournaments.
Absolutely. Is there any kind of shout outs you want to do, Janis?
None in particular. I mean, I've shouted out Baron of Dice and Pop Goes the Monkey. They get a significant amount of my money. Also, give Lester's Workshop a shout out so Dakotah doesn't have to.
Thank you.
Please use the affiliate link.
It's in our show notes.
It is. G, anything you want to shout out?
Yep, I'm gonna do my thing right now. Well, since we're talking about affiliates here, we want to thank a couple of our affiliates. First off, we want to go with FLG. If you're in the market for new box sets, secondhand models, or attending one of their events, consider using our link in the description. We get a little bit of a kickback. That kickback helps us run more events, make more episodes, and keep doing things for the community of Kill Team, and hopefully more in the future. And the next one I want to shout out is Goblin Huts. So if you're looking to step up your hobby game or just use one of their cool hobby tools, brushes, things that they have on their website, consider using code SQUAD10 at checkout. That's SQUAD10, SQUAD10 at checkout, which again gives us a little bit of kickback, helps us out. And lastly, I want to thank our patrons. They help us out in a more personal way. And regardless of whether you're a patron or you're just listening to this episode or coming to our things, we really appreciate it. And of course, if you want to find me, I'm on Instagram at Wargaming _studios. And I'm also on our Discord, our Squad Games Discord, which the link is in the description. And you can go ahead and tell us something we might have missed in this episode, or maybe something you really liked about it. How about you, Dakotah? What do you got?
So I want to shout out our next two most closest tournaments. We're going to be running the West Coast Championship here in California. We had to change venues recently because the biggest game store, the best game store that we ran tournaments at recently has closed, and it's a very sad day for Southern California. And a lot of these players are going to be looking for a new home. So as long as we as long as we, continue that, I think that should be good. Shout out to Games at My Place and the owners for making it such a welcoming place for us, and look forward to hopefully working with you sometime in the future. Also want to shout out Las Vegas Open. That's going to be the next tournament after our West Coast Championship. That's going to be taking place January 18th through the 21st. If you can come, we would love to see you there. Love to shake your guys' hands, give high fives, hugs if you like them, and experience hopefully the biggest tournament that Kill Team has ever seen. So looking forward to that one, and looking forward to seeing everyone who I haven't got to see in the past few months since I've been to the East Coast. So outside of that, that's all I got.
Do we have a Patreon question?
We do have a Patreon question.
Oh, awesome.
All right. I'll post it here. So Cactus Cat, Alexander Popov has asked us a question for Warp Coven, and how do we fix them? Yeah. So his idea was, what if everybody's favorite enjoy your 1-inch dash spell, right, becomes a strategic ploy, something like 0 plus CP cost. Since it's used pretty much every single round, the team becomes extremely formulaic as a team itself, because you have a certain round of activations, and it doesn't help the team at all that you're running the exact same activation first, right, every single round,
right?
To do that kind of stuff, it seems very counterproductive. And that was his suggestion, is that Warp Coven gets it costs 0 CP, then 1 CP, then 2 CP, then 3 CP, so on and so forth.
I actually kind of like that.
Right? Seems very, very interesting.
I like that a lot. That makes it. That frees up a sorcerer to be able to do other things than just, because that's going to be one of your first or second activations, of course. So
it also frees up your 4 EP scroll that you use every game.
Yeah.
Right? In case you need that sorcerer to do something else, then a different sorcerer can cast slow.
Yeah, that would definitely be helpful.
Yeah. It seems like it would be that's a really good change, Alex, and I really like it.
Yeah, echoing Dakotah, I really like that change. That would be something beneficial for the team and help them a lot, I believe.
Go ahead.
I want to point this out for you guys. That is one change, but does that inherently change the way the team composition is changed? Because it sounds like nowadays you just sort of want to run Zangors, since they can take either of the archetypes. How do you fix it so you want to take Rubric Marines?
Rubric Marines just suck.
Exactly. So how do you fix it so you want to take them?
How do you fix it? You create an actual Thousand Suns team.
There you go.
Yeah. You create a whole new team.
At this point, that's my feelings. Is you would have to create an entire new team from the ground up.
Yeah, but
based around the Thousand Suns.
If that were to happen, do you think Warp Coven would be gone?
I think it would overwrite Warp Coven, to be honest.
I still really like the idea of, you can take different sorcerers that do different things. You would take one sorcerer, and that sorcerer can take like 2 or a Rubric Marine, or you can take like a shaman, and you can take like 3 of these, and then you could take like one of those warp change guys, and you get like 3 demons, 3 like pink horrors or some shit.
That'd
be
be a fun one.
Yeah, and I think it would be a relatively easy thing to add into the data sheet. You would just need 3 new operatives, a pink horror, a shaman, and like the other kind of sorcerer. But in the end, I still think it would require a full rework. Also, if we were talking about how to fix the current team, because that was his question,
right?
I would say take away all this stupid BS with if this guy's within 3 inches of a sorcerer, or actually 6 inches now. Oh, wait, like if they're just on the table. No, just give the rubrics 3 APL.
Yep.
Can we please just give them 3 APL?
It'd make them worth like at least using,
Also, give the entire team the infiltration thing and let them take recon and security. So no matter what operatives they bring, give them all 3. They already have like infiltrate type things with some of their faction tac ops, and you can really dive deep into like some kind of infiltrate-y, changey thing, right? With the team. I think that I really like their bolters. Their bolters are really good. They just
bolters are cool.
Yeah, they're AP1 bolters, and they're actually really decent. But the problem is like you can't really fire twice. There's no way that you'd want to fire twice.
Okay, my take on how to make the team better, based on current rules that have been released. Bump Zangor up to the same stat profile as Felgor. So give them the extra wounds. And I don't remember the name of the attack op or whatever it is that gives the 5+ invulnerability to Warp Coven. Make it the same as the Legionary where it's 4 up.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because why is the Legionary able to do it, to have a 4 up where Zench's Chosen only have a 5 up?
Because the narrative?
Because reasons.
Because actually,
Legionary are better. There's no good answer to that.
But no, that's kind of, if I had the power to wave the wand and make the changes, those are 2 that I would definitely do to make things better for the team.
Yeah, I think that being able to like make the team be able to change or do more things is very interesting. Rather than just like, because when you look at the team and how they function the same way every single round. They really do. Like it's weird that like it took Alex's question for me to actually think that. But like a team of change doesn't want to change.
Yeah.
So that's a great question, Alex. I appreciate you, brother.
Good question. Oh, I did have, what was last week's question? I did have a comment.
Different kind of dice.
Yes.
It was Rob. Rob asked if we could use, like if there was another type of dice to be added to Kill Team, what would it be and why?
Oh, right. That's what it was. And I know Dakotah and I spoke about this, kind of off to the side in a phone call, but I just want to say, having been a veteran of this game for close to 40 years, Games Workshop started as a D6 company. They're going to die a D6 company.
It's very true.
So
yeah, man, they should start doing Shadowrun, right?
I know, right?
Buckets of D6.
Shadowrun and Orc Shooting. You use the same amount of dice.
Well, on that note, we're coming to a close, guys.
Okay.
I had a lot of fun. And
it was a good time. I enjoyed our chat, as controversial as it was at some points.
Yeah. And then you can tell us how wrong we were in our Discord. Just rate us 5 stars on Spotify and Apple Podcasts because it helps us be seen.
Please.
Yeah. Even if you didn't like our takes. That'd be nice.
You can give us a 1 star. It's fine.
Yeah, you give us a 1 star too.
Give a 5 star, but then you can type in how much you didn't like it.
The Squad Games Podcast is a production of Squad Games Entertainment. For more information on Squad Games, please visit our website at lestersworkshop.com/squad-games.